This audio is for educational purposes only. I hope this will add light to your journey. Please share this audio to your loved ones, family and friends. Thank you.
Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. Introduction. Can we love others more than we love ourselves? The idea of self-love and self-acceptance was, and still is, revolutionary thinking for me. So in early 2009, I asked my blog readers what they thought about the importance of self-love and the idea that we can't love others more than we love ourselves. Well, there was quite the emotional debate in the comments section. Several folks passionately disagreed with the notion of self-love being a requirement for loving others. Others argued that we can actually learn how to love ourselves more by loving others. Some folks just left comments like, "Thanks for ruining my day, I don't want to think about this." There were two comments that addressed the complexity of these ideas. In very straightforward terms, I'd like to share these with you. Justin Valentine, a mental health professional, writer, and photographer, wrote, "Through my children, I have learned to really love unconditionally, to be compassionate at times, when I am feeling horrible, and to be so much more giving. When I look at my one daughter, who looks so much like me, I can see myself as a little girl. This reminds me to be kinder to the little girl that lives inside me, and to love and accept her as my own. It is the love for my girls that makes me want to be a better person, and to work on loving and accepting myself. However, with that being said, it is still so much easier to love my daughters. Perhaps, thinking about it this way makes more sense. Many of my patients are mothers who struggle with drug addiction. They love the children more than themselves. They destroy their lives, hate themselves, and often damage their bodies beyond repair. They say they hate themselves, but they love the children. They believe the children are lovable, but they believe they are unlovable. On the surface, one might say, yes, some of them love the children more than themselves. However, does loving your children mean that you are not intentionally poisoning them the way you poison yourself? Perhaps our issues are like second-hand smoke. At first, it was thought to be not so dangerous, and by smoking we were only hurting ourselves. Yet, we have come to find out, years later, second-hand smoke can be very deadly. Renee Cobb, a therapist in training by day, and an undercover writer, and occasional blog contributor by night, wrote, "Certainly, the people we love inspire us to heights of love and compassion that we might have never achieved otherwise. But to really scale those heights, we often have to go to the depths of who we are, light, shadow, good, evil, loving, destructive, and figure out our own stuff in order to love them better." So I'm not sure it's an either or, but a both and. We love others fiercely, maybe more than we think we love ourselves, but that fierce love should drive us to the depths of ourselves so that we can learn to be compassionate with ourselves. I agree with Justin and Renee. Loving and accepting ourselves are the ultimate acts of courage. In a society that says, "Put yourself last, self-lover," and self-acceptance are almost revolutionary. If we want to take part in this revolution, we have to understand the anatomy of love and belonging. We need to understand when and why we hustle for worthiness rather than claim it. And we have to understand the things that get in the way. We encounter obstacles on every journey we make. The wholehearted journey is no different. In the next chapter, we'll explore what I've found to be the greatest barriers to living and loving with our whole hearts. Things that get in the way. In 2008, I was invited to give a talk at a very special event called The Up Experience. I really liked the couple sponsoring the event, so without giving it much thought, I excitedly agreed to do it. Well, you know how things always sound better when they're far away, and you don't know the details. This was one of those things. I accepted the invitation in late 2008, and never thought about it again until 2009, when the list of speakers was published on the Up Experience website. Suffice it to say, that it was an overwhelmingly prestigious list of folks. And me. The event was billed as 16 of the world's most exciting thought leaders and speakers. One mind-opening day, I freaked out. I couldn't imagine sharing the stage with Robert Ballard, the archaeological oceanographer who located the Titanic, Gavin Newsom, the mayor of San Francisco, Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist who hosts NOVA, and runs the Hayden Planetarium, and David Plouffe, the genius behind Obama's presidential campaign. And that's just 4 out of the 15. On top of trying to manage feeling like a complete imposter, I was terrified about the format. The event was modeled after the TED Talks, www.ted.com, and each speaker would have only 20 minutes to share their most innovative ideas, with what they were calling a C-suite audience, an audience of mostly CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and CIOs, who were paying $1,000 for the day-long event. Seconds after I saw the list of speakers, I called my friend, Jen Lemon, and read the list of names to her. After the last name, I took a deep breath and said, "I'm not so sure about this." Even though we were on the phone, and she was thousands of miles away, I could see her shaking her head. "Put your measuring stick away, Brené." I bristled. "What do you mean?" Jen said. "I know you." "Why?" "Oh, already thinking about how to make your 20-minute talk super researchy and complicated." I still didn't get it. "Well, yes, of course I'm going to be researchy. Do you see this list of people? They're grown-ups." Jen chuckled. "Do you need an age check?" Dead silence on my end. Jen explained, "Here's the thing. You're a researcher, but your best work isn't from the head, it's talking from the heart. You'll be fine, if you do what you do best, tell stories. Keep it real, keep it honest." I hung up, rolled my eyes, and thought, tell stories. You've got to be kidding. Maybe I could do a little puppet show too. Normally, it takes me a day or two to develop a talk. I never speak from notes, but I normally have a visual presentation and an idea of what I want to say. Not this time. A puppet show would have been easier. I was paralyzed for weeks over this presentation. Nothing was working. One evening, about 2 weeks before the event, Steve asked, "How's your up talk coming along?" I burst into tears. "It's not coming along. I don't have shit. I can't do it. I'm going to have to fake a car wreck or something." Steve sat down next to me and grabbed my hand. "What's going on? This isn't like you. I've never seen you unravel like this over a talk. You do these things all the time." I buried my head in my hands and mumbled, "I'm blocked. I just can't stop thinking about this horrible experience that happened several years ago." Steve sounded surprised. "What experience?" "I never told you about it," I explained. He leaned toward me and waited. 5 years ago, I bombed a talk. Like I had never bombed before or since. It was a total disaster, and I'm so afraid that it's going to happen again. Steve couldn't believe that I had never told him about my disastrous experience. "What in the hell happened? Why didn't you tell me?" I got up from the table and said, "I don't want to talk about it. It will just make it worse." He grabbed my hand and pulled me back to the table. He looked at me in an "I've been waiting my whole life to use your line against you way. Don't we need to talk about the hard things? Doesn't talking always make it better?" I was too tired to fight. So I told him this story. 5 years ago, when my first book came out, I was asked to speak at a women's networking lunch. I was so excited because, like the UP experience, I would be speaking to a group of normal people, not therapists or academics, but normal business people. In fact, this event was my first normal audience group. I arrived early at the swanky country club, where the event was being hosted, and I introduced myself to the woman in charge. After sizing me up, for what felt like an eternity, she greeted me with a stack of short pronouncements. "Hello, you don't look like a researcher. I'm going to introduce you. I need your bio." It was an uptight twist on, "Nice to meet you too, but okay." I handed her my bio, and that was the beginning of the end. She read it for 30 seconds before she gasped, turned to me, and peering over her reading glasses, snapped, "This says that you're a shame researcher. Is that true?" All of a sudden, I was 10 years old and in the principal's office. I hung my head and whispered, "Yes, ma'am. I'm a shame researcher." With her lips pursed, she popped, "Do you study anything else?" I couldn't tell her. "Do you?" she demanded. "Yes. I also study fear and vulnerability." She shrapsed, which is like a combo shriek and gasp. I was told that you collected research on how to be more joyful, and how to have more connection and meaning in our lives. Ah. Got it. She didn't know anything about me. She must have heard about me, from someone who failed to mention the nature of my work. Now it all made sense. I tried to explain. I don't really study how to be joyful and have more meaning in our lives. I know a lot about these topics, because I study the things that get in the way of joy, meaning, and connection. Without even responding to me, she walked out of the room and left me standing there. Oh, the irony of a shame researcher standing in a puddle of, I'm not good enough. She came back a few minutes later, looked right over the top of my head, and said, here's how this is going to go. Number 1, you're not going to talk about the things that get in the way. You're going to talk about the how to part. That's what people want to hear. People want how to. Number 2, do not mention the word shame. People will be eating. Number 3, people want to be comfortable and joyful. That's all. Keep it joyful and comfortable. I just stood there in total shock. After a few quiet seconds, she asked, okay. And before I could say anything, she answered for me, sounds good. Then, just as she started walking away, she turned around and said, light and breezy. People like light and breezy. And, just in case I wasn't clear, she spread her fingers far apart and made huge sweeping gestures with her hands to illustrate light and breezy. Picture Margaret Thatcher imitating Bob Fosse. For 40 minutes, I stood in front of this group, totally paralyzed, and repeating different versions of joy is good. Happy is so good. We should all be joyful and have meaning, because they're just so darn good. The women in the audience just smiled, nodded, and ate their chicken. It was a train wreck. By the time I ended the story, Steve's face was all scrunched up, and he was shaking his head. He's not a big fan of public speaking, so I think he was staving off his own anxiety as he listened to my disaster story. But, strangely enough, telling the story made me less anxious. In fact, the second that I finished telling Steve the story, I felt different. I finally got it. My work, me, the decade I've spent doing research, it's all about the things that get in the way. I'm not about the how to, because in 10 years, I've never seen any evidence of how to working without talking about the things that get in the way. In a very powerful way, owning this story allowed me to claim who I am as a researcher and to establish my voice. I looked at Steve and smiled. I don't do how to. For the first time in 5 years, I realized that the country club woman wasn't out to get me and sabotage my talk. If that were the case, her ridiculous parameet ours wouldn't have been so devastating to me. Her list was symptomatic of our cultural fears. We don't want to be uncomfortable. We want a quick and dirty how to list for happiness. I don't fit that bill. Never have. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to skip over the hard stuff, but it just doesn't work. We don't change, we don't grow, and we don't move forward without the work. If we really want to live a joyful, connected, and meaningful life, we must talk about things that get in the way. Until I owned and spoke this story, I let my lack of quick tips and 5 simple steps get in the way of my professional worthiness. Now that I've claimed that story, I see that my understanding of the darkness gives my search for the light context and meaning. I'm happy to report that the up experience went really well. I actually told this light and breezy story as my talk. It was a risk, but I figured that even C-suites struggle with worthiness. A couple of weeks after the event, I got a call from the organizer. She said, "Congratulations. The evaluations are in, and your talk finished in the top 2 of the day, and given what you study, you were the dark horse going in. Here's the bottom line. If we want to live and love with our whole hearts, and if we want to engage with the world from a place of worthiness, we have to talk about the things that get in the way, especially shame, fear, and vulnerability." In Jungian circles, shame is often referred to as the swampland of the soul. I'm not suggesting that we wade out into the swamp and set up camp. I've done that, and I can tell you that the swampland of the soul is an important place to visit, but you would not want to live there. What I'm proposing is that we learn how to wade through it. We need to see that standing on the shore And catastrophizing about what could happen, if we talked honestly about our fears, is actually more painful than grabbing the hand of a trusted companion and crossing the swamp. And, most important, we need to learn why constantly trying to maintain our footing on the shifting shore as we gaze across to the other side of the swamp, where our worthiness waits for us, is much harder work than trudging across. How to is a seductive shortcut, and I understand that. Why cross the swamp if you can just bypass it? But here's the dilemma: why is how to so alluring when truthfully we already know how to, yet we're still standing in the same place, longing for more joy, connection, and meaning? Most everyone reading this book knows how to eat healthy. I can tell you the Weight Watcher points for every food in the grocery store. I can recite the South Beach Phase 1 grocery shopping list and the glycemic index like the Pledge of Allegiance. We know how to eat healthy. We also know how to make good choices with our money. We know how to take care of our emotional needs. We know all of this, yet, we are the most obese, medicated, addicted, and in debt Americans ever. Why? We have more access to information, more books, and more good science. Why are we struggling like never before? Because we don't talk about the things that get in the way of doing what we know is best for us. Our children, our families, our organizations, and our communities. I can know everything there is to know about eating healthy, but if it's one of those days when Ellen is struggling with a school project, and Charlie's homesick from school, and I'm trying to make a writing deadline, and Homeland Security increase the threat level, and our grass is dying, and my jeans don't fit, and the economy is tanking, and the internet is down, and we're out of poop bags for the dog, forget it. All I want to do is snuff out the sizzling anxiety with a pumpkin muffin, a bag of chips, and chocolate. We don't talk about what keeps us eating until we're sick, busy beyond human scale, desperate to numb and take the edge off, and full of so much anxiety and self-doubt that we can't act on what we know is best for us. We don't talk about the hustle for worthiness that's become such a part of our lives that we don't even realize that we're dancing. When I'm having one of those days that I just described, some of the anxiety is just a part of living, but there are days when most of my anxiety grows out of the expectations I put on myself. I want Ellen's project to be amazing. I want to take care of Charlie without worrying about my own deadlines. I want to show the world how great I am at balancing my family and career. I want our yard to look beautiful. I want people to see us picking up our dog's poop in biodegradable bags and think, my God, they are such outstanding citizens. There are days when I can fight the urge to be everything to everyone. And there are days when it gets the best of me. As we discussed in the last chapter, when we struggle to believe in our worthiness, we hustle for it. The hustle for worthiness has its own soundtrack. And for those of you who are my age and older, it's not the funky, do the hustle from the 70s. It's the cacophony of shame tapes and gremlins, those messages that fuel, never good enough. What will people think? You can't really love yourself yet. You're not blank enough. Pretty, skinny, successful, rich, talented, happy, smart, feminine, masculine, productive, nice, strong, tough, caring, popular, creative, well-liked, admired, contributing. No one can find out about blank. I'm going to pretend that everything is okay. I can change to fit in if I have to. Who do you think you are to put your thoughts, art, ideas, beliefs, writing out in the world? Taking care of them is more important than taking care of me. Shame is that warm feeling that washes over us, making us feel small, flawed, and never good enough. If we want to develop shame resilience, the ability to recognize shame and move through it while maintaining our worthiness and authenticity, then we have to talk about why shame happens. Honest conversations about shame can change the way we live, love, parent, work, and build relationships. I have more than 1,000 letters and emails from readers of I Thought It Was Just Me, my book on shame resilience, that all say the same thing. I can't believe how much talking about shame changed my life, and I promise, even if you're eating while you're talking about shame, you'll be okay.